I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
You're welcome, ma'am.
All right. This evening, we have a presentation about career and technical education update. Mr. Soltis, are you?
That's me, and I would have to share my screen, please.
Absolutely, sir. You're set up for screen sharing.
Okay. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Great. First of all, let me thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. I hope everyone's having a wonderful Monday. What I'm going to talk to you tonight is about career technical education. For those that may not know, years ago it used to be called vocational education, but over the past several years it's become known as career technical education, or CTE as it's commonly referred to as. I'm going to try to explain to you why we teach what we teach when it comes to career tech ed, how it's got the national influence, the state influence, and also a local flavor to it. We'll also talk a little bit about our completers, the number of completers we have, talk a little bit about James Rumsey. We'll talk about credentials students can earn. So again, let's talk about why we teach what we teach in career tech ed. It's all based on these 16 national career clusters. There are 16 of them. They are determined by the Department of Education, the State Department of Education. That's kind of the core where it all starts from the national level. So we have the clusters, which are national level. The next area we want to talk about is called programs of study. This is kind of where the state gets involved with the career clusters. There are about 100 different programs of studies within the state that correspond with each of the clusters. The first cluster that we'll talk about is the first one that we listed earlier, is the agriculture, food, natural resources cluster. That's the national piece. So programs of study are what the state determines. So you can see I've listed the 4 programs of study that we teach in Jefferson County schools that are related to that career cluster. You can also see I've added off to the right there the little icon for FFA. One of the unique things about career tech ed classes is each of them does have a student organization. It's called a CTSO, Career Technical Student Organization. Each one does have a CTSO tied to it, and I'm sure you've all are familiar with the FFA, which works with our agriculture courses. The next cluster is arts, AV, and communication. We do have 2 programs of study here in Jefferson County that our students can take. Both of these are taught at James Rumsey, the multimedia publishing and the graphic design. And you can see their CTSO is Skills USA. Architecture and construction cluster. And again, the programs of studies our students can take. And again, those 3 are taught at James Rumsey. Business management and administration. Program of studies is management and administrative support. And then education, training, careers, and ed. Both of these programs are taught at Washington High School. And again, you can see these CTSOs related to those concentrations. Finance, government public administration, health services, and again, program of studies are the ones we offer here in Jefferson County and the corresponding CTSOs. Just a shout out to our ROTC program. I don't know if you realize or not, but they currently have 7 students enrolled in service academies, which I think is just wonderful. So shout out to them. And I'm sure you've all heard of the wonderful things that ROTC does in the county. Hospitality and Tourism Cluster, Human Services Cluster, and again, Program of Studies, ProStart, and Early Childhood, which is taught at James Rumsey, and ProStart's taught at Jefferson High School. Information Technology Cluster, and then several of the programs of studies we offer with that. Coding, Apps, Game Design, which is taught at Washington High School and at James Rumsey. Cisco, James Rumsey. Advanced Information, James Rumsey, and Information Management, which is at Washington High School. And again, the CTSOs to go with those. Law, Public Safety, Manufacturing, all taught at James Rumsey. Marketing, which is taught at Washington High School. And then the Transportation, Distribution, and Logistics classes that are taught at James Rumsey. So those are these 16 different career clusters and the programs of studies that we teach related to each of those clusters. Now let's narrow it down a little bit more to the programs of study. Each program of study is made up of 4 different courses. So example here is the Careers in Education program of study. These are the 4 required courses. These are determined by the state. So anybody that takes Careers in Education in Jefferson County will have to take, or at least should take, these 4 courses. When they do take those 4 courses, they become what known as a completer. Now we all like our completers. There any student that could successfully take all 4 of those required courses, that person is called a completer. Last year we had 55 completers here in Jefferson County with an additional 19 completers at James Rumsey. And listed here are the different programs of studies that those students completed in last year, not including James Rumsey completers. Those are just ours. One of the other unique advantages of Career Tech Ed is there are several industry recognized certifications that students can take. You can see several of those listed here: Adobe, Microsoft, and so on. There are others that are taught at James Rumsey. I did not list all the James Rumsey certifications, but these are the ones that are offered to our students in our schools. Here is a list of enrollment for the past 3 years. You can see 18-19. At Jefferson High School, we had 625 students who enrolled in at least one CTE class. That means that's 44% of students at Jefferson High School took at least one CTE class. Washington High School, 536 students, 41% of the student body. That year we had 96 students enrolled at James Rumsey. Completers back then in 18-19, we had 53 completers at Jefferson High School, 20 at Washington High School for a total of 73 completers. Then James Rumsey had an additional 43 completers. During that year, we tested 70 random drug tests in Jefferson County. That does not include James Rumsey numbers. And that year we had 170 credentials earned by Jefferson County students, again, not including James Rumsey. Then we have last year's numbers. 523 enrolled in at least one CT class at Jefferson, which was 36% of the student body. 555 at Washington, which was 42%. James Rumsey, 121 students. And again, you can see the numbers across here. Now notice the drug tests dropped last year. That was because of COVID and leaving school early. We just didn't get a chance to test students. We would have certainly had more than that if we'd have been in school. And again, same thing with the credentials. A lot of the credentials are earned at the end of the year, and we took a hit on credentials last year because of COVID. Then the numbers for this year, you can see 514 at Jefferson, 35% of the student body. 562 at Washington, 42%. James Rumsey enrollment, 131. And this is our potential completers this year. 56 for Jefferson, 13 from Washington, total of 69. Then we have a potential 41 completers from James Rumsey. drug tests to be determined. We just haven't been in school to drug test anyone this year, but we're hoping to be able to get some of that done here, hopefully soon. If you want to ask questions about this now, you can, or we can wait till the end. It's up to you. We'll go ahead and move on. CT completers. CT completers, again, is a student that has taken all 4 of the required courses. Some good news about completers. 96% of any students that have taken CT courses that are completers graduate, compared to 85% of non-CT students. 97% of West Virginia CT completers either go to work or go on to post-secondary education after high school. So that's very impressive. Now we talked about the national piece, the clusters, the state piece, the programs of studies. We also involve local industry with our decisions. Each program does have a advisory council that they work with that utilizes several local business industry people to help them decide on things they work on in the classroom. Here are the latest that I could find figures on the top 10 employers in Jefferson County. Now this is from 2019, but I called the Development Authority, and this is the most recent data they had, even though Rural Vendors is no longer with us, but this is the most recent data they could give me. But you can see the top 10 employers, and then you can kind of see how our programs of studies that we teach kind of match up with those. You can see there are several education entities in here: Board of Education, Shepherd, American Public University. Of course, our Careers in Ed program would work very nicely with those. The casino, we've got ProStart Restaurant Management. We've got Animal Systems, the equine services over there with the horses, agribusiness systems, management, accounting, information. Those can go with pretty much any industry. We know that healthcare is a growing field. West Virginia Medical, Valley students can take therapeutic health at James Rumsey. So that kind of tells you how what we are teaching aligns with employment in our area. More good news about CT classes. Students can get EDGE credit for their CT courses. That means it's any course they take in high school, they can get credit for that when they go on to, usually it's a community college, Blue Ridge CTC specifically in our area. Also, CTEs are career technical student organizations. They benefit not only the students, but they're also a big benefit to the community. You know, they've done many great things. We know about the ROTC and their shoe and coat fund. The FFA does a lot of wonderful things with homeless and preparing meals. The FCCLA at Washington High School, shout out to them. They work with the senior center doing senior proms and holiday parties. Lots of good things go on with our career technical student organizations. Of course, it's been kind of slow this year because just can't get out and be involved as we normally are, but we certainly look for the day when that'll be back to where it was. 81% of dropouts said that real world learning may have influenced them to stay in school. Well, that's what career tech is. It's real world hands-on learning. So it's very important for students. They enjoy it. It keeps them in school. So I kind of went through that pretty quickly. Does anybody have any questions that I might be able to help you with?
Marty, I just have a couple questions.
Sure.
How much leeway or flexibility do we have as far as the programs of study go that affect our area, if you will? And so with our staff or our teachers saying, hey, we could use this or we could use that, how much flexibility do we have in those programs?
We do have some flexibility, and that is one thing I wanted to mention is some of the changes we've made over the past few years. One of the things we added just a few years ago was a computer gaming and apps program at Washington High School. There was a need across the state for coders and gaming design employees. So the state kind of promoted that we do that. We had a teacher at Washington High School that was all about it, so she wanted to give it a try. Now, the only limitation we have sometimes is we cannot duplicate programs because there's only so much money to go around. James Rumsey was teaching coding and still is teaching coding, gaming, and apps. So we had to get special permission from them to be able to teach it ourselves. And I know Dr. Gibson and Mr. Cable, we went over there and spoke to their administrative council along with the teacher, and they agreed to allow us to try it for 2 years. Last year we had 40 students enrolled, and this year we have 65 students enrolled. So that program is blooming. It does not seem to have affected their enrollment. So I think that's going to be a long-term program for us. So to kind of get back to your question, we do have some say in what we can teach. You know, we have to make sure there's jobs available in the area for that. We have to make sure we have staff that is capable of teaching some programs. We have to be careful that we don't duplicate programs with Rumsey. But yeah, there is some flexibility in what we teach, and that is one of the programs we did add. The second one we added several years ago was careers in education. Of course, we know there's a need for teachers in the area, so we started that program at Washington High School. It's been very successful, produced several graduates that have gone on to college and are now teachers. We actually had 2 teachers in our system that were graduates of that program. Unfortunately, they were able to make more money in other states and are no longer with us, but we do have that program, and we are kind of growing our own teachers with that. So that's a good thing. We've also added the state required simulated workplace. I mentioned earlier about the random drug testing. Simulated workplace is exactly what it says, is a simulated workplace where students simulate a workplace, including random drug testing, because we know that is a big part of the industry today. So we are doing that with our students, and it's been a very good program. I always tell parents when I meet with them, you know, they're a little hesitant at first, but I tell them, you know, think about it this way. You know, your student's going to be working with other people in their class that you know they're safe. They're not going to be under an influence that could cause harm to anybody in the classroom. And the one thing I really like about it is, you know, kids are kids, and peer pressure is very important for them at this stage of their lives. So I always tell their parents, think of it, you know, when your student gets in a situation that they may not want to be in, and there's kids doing things that maybe they don't want to do and shouldn't be doing, they always have that out to say, you know, I just can't do that. I may be tested next week. So it gives the kids a good out if they need it sometimes to get out of some uncomfortable situations. So that's another program we've added. And I don't know, I hope that answers your question. If not, I'll certainly try to answer it better.
Yeah, no, I was wondering too, it got me thinking that when you were talking about that, because of all of the virtual that we've been involved in this year and whatnot, if we have that many kids that have signed up for especially the coding class, you know, coding, computer, gaming, apps, whatever is going on with that one as well, clearly there's an interest of, number one, you know, if they had to go to Rumsey, you know, I think some of them would have had to not be able to take that class just because of, you know, missing out on some of the other classes that they had to take at the school level and not having the time in the day to make the transportation. But because of the virtual, do you think we could possibly even explore the thought of between either Jefferson and Washington and between Rumsey and Washington or Rumsey and Jefferson of a virtual where the teacher, yes, it is a Rumsey program, the teacher's at Rumsey, but it is piped into one of the other 2 schools, and the teacher in the classroom at Jefferson and at Washington works with the teacher at Rumsey to be able to, they're responsible then for the grading for the teacher or the students in their own class. So it doesn't overwhelm one staff member with, you know, that many students. But at the same time, we still follow the protocol that it's a Rumsey program, but we're opening up the doors to so many more kids, as well as putting the infrastructure between Jefferson and Washington, that if the teacher is at Washington High School teaching certain things, can we have that class available at Jefferson through a virtual where the teacher's brought in through the smart board or whatever, and then there's a teacher in the classroom at Jefferson, but then they're responsible for the grading and collaborating as staff. Long term, you know, is there something that we can look at that?
Certainly we can look at that. I think that might open some doors that haven't been opened to this point, the big thing about career tech is it's all hands-on. So we do want students to get that hands-on experience, and I could see that possibly working that way, the way you mentioned. But yeah, we're certainly open to new things like that. We'll have to first of all determine what class we think that might work, and we have to have the teachers that are willing and knowledgeable enough to teach those certain courses. That seems to be one of the biggest drawbacks is, we like to teach a lot of things, but we need to have somebody to do it, somebody that's knowledgeable and somebody that wants to do it. And I'm certainly all for that if we have somebody that's interested in that.
Right. And that, I guess that too goes to my point that, yeah, if the Rumsey person is actually the certified person to do that, how can we do that legally to have a teacher in a Jefferson and or a Washington classroom, but the certified person who's responsible is at Rumsey, but then, Rumsey wouldn't even have, 55 or 65 other spots, however many students we have enrolled. We wouldn't even be able to get that many kids into a Rumsey program just by the nature of the fact they don't have that much space available to us. But I think from what I'm hearing you say, it may, obviously the need is tested at least to start with one thing. And that, I think to look at that in the future as far as moving to a virtual type of platform to open that up for more students might be a good option for us.
Sure, I can certainly work with Donna up there at the school. I'm very familiar with the teachers up there. I taught up James Rumsey for 15 years, so I'm very familiar with the folks up there and have a good working relationship with them. So I'd be more than happy to present that to Donna and see if she has any thoughts on courses that we might be able to operate on like that. We'd have to determine, what those courses would be, but I'll certainly check into that.
And do we currently have a DECA program, Marty, or we don't, Mr. Soltis? We don't have a.
We are starting one at Washington High School. We have a teacher. It's kind of her first year over there. It's actually her second year, but last year she was out on some medical issues, but she's back this year, and she is working towards getting DECA up and running. So we're working on it. We've been trying to work on DECA for many years at Washington High School, but it's just been a revolving door there with teachers, and we've had a lot of uncertified teachers, and just, again, a revolving door, and not really been able to get it established to this point. But she's a good one, and I think given time that she will get it up and running over there. She's already started. As far as Jefferson, we've got our issues over there. We're hoping to get interest in classes at Jefferson High School. Again, this is the first year. This year we did not have any business or marketing classes at Jefferson High School, and we're hoping to build enough interest to get that program started up again in the very, very near future. But yeah, we're working on those student organizations for all of our CTE courses.
Do you know of the 55 completers, how many of them were ROTC?
Most of them are. A large percentage, I would say probably 60–70% of those are ROTC completers. It's a very large program. It has several hundred students in it, 250 plus students in it. So our ROTC is a very large program, and probably 60% or so of those completers are from ROTC.
And I would just add to, I remember when Austin did the DECA program at Jefferson, the lady who, actually the representatives who are the main DECA representatives from DC, even back then, I'm sure they would still do it just, for help. We're obviously closer to DC than we are to Charleston, to get state representatives to come up and kind of help, whatever. And I know even then they did, say that they're more than willing if you, call them and reach out or whatever to come and do trainings or help in any way that they can, if they're, if there's an interest in that, just for the staff as well who want to do that.
Sure, and Charleston's very helpful too. They're more than willing to help us with training.
Yes.
Again, our biggest problem is not the training, but just finding somebody to train that we can count on staying there for any length of time. That's been our issue.
Okay. I think it's great to see the numbers for Rumsey increasing.
Yes.
That is exciting. And what is our kind of plan or thoughts on what we're going to do to change the trend for the CTE completers, and even just for the numbers in general decreasing in CTE classes?
Well, it's always been a goal to try to have more completers at each school, and that continues to be a goal. One of the challenges we face is we have students that are doing the coursework, but the way the state recognizes them in WEVUS is we're not getting credit for them. We've got them, but according to the state, we don't, because of the way they're being entered in WEVUS. And I've been working with Jen and Kathy, and we've been working diligently on trying to get that solved, where we're getting credit for our completers, because right now we have them, but we're not getting credit for them, and that's kind of reflecting in our scorecards. So that's one of the areas that we are currently working on. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, is there anything in the state, I mean, as far as CTE in general? I mean, I know that life in general for us all is evolving. What CTE looks like is evolving.
Mm-hmm.
How are our programs changing, or what are we looking at to make a difference, in the lives of our students going forward, knowing that jobs are going to change and the requirements are going to change?
Absolutely. And then one of the things I mentioned was a simulated workplace, where they are simulated workplace, where students are giving responsibilities just like they are in a job. There's attendance directors. They clock in, they clock out like a regular job. They are subject to random drug testing. There's the big push is credentials, is more and more credentials available for students, industry recognized credentials that students can earn at no cost while they're in high school, Microsoft certifications, and other certifications that are offered to our students. So that is another big push, is getting kids to get these credentials to take with them once they leave school, along with the certification that being drug-free. That's more and more important every day, and we're trying to get that for our students as well.
And I guess
I have questions. They're
Yeah.
actual questions.
Go ahead.
Are you finished?
Absolutely, you go right ahead.
So why aren't you offering a business program at Jefferson anymore? That's one question.
Enrollment got to the point where we could not justify hiring a teacher for the number of students that we had enrolling.
Okay. What happens if a student tests positive for drugs in that program?
The thing is, it's not a punitive program. It's designed to get a student help. So if a student would, and luckily we've not had anybody test positive in the past 3 years. But if somebody would, we have process in place where they would not be kicked out of school. They're not kicked out of class, but what they do in class may be altered just for their own safety. Of course, parents are notified. They would have to get some guidance, some counseling, and they would have to retest again until they tested clean. They may have to limit on the activities they do in class because they don't want to hurt themselves. But it's not punitive. They're not kicked out of school. It's designed to get people help if they need it.
Okay. Is it a competitive program? How do students qualify to enroll in the program, and how do they find out about it?
Well, it's certainly in our program of studies and well advertised in there. That it does include simulated workplace. Of course, the counselors are aware of it as well. We do some recruiting. We up until this point, we had all the 8th graders coming to Jefferson High School to see the different classes. Of course, we couldn't do that this year. Washington also does some different recruiting activities with the incoming 8th graders. So when they start signing up in 9th grade, they're aware of their options. So we do our best to make kids aware. Of course, our CTSOs are very in the spotlight sometime with ROTC and FFA and FCCLA. Kids see them in the paper all the time. They see them at the blood drives. They see them at the community events. So that's a big recruiting tool for us. The ROTC students and all the activities they do, just being in the community helps those class enrollments as well.
And how do they qualify? Is it competitive? Did you, I didn't know if you mentioned that. Just,
I think
can
if somebody
any
wants to take
student
a,
enroll?
yeah, anyone can enroll. Anyone can enroll. There's no limitations. There's no you can't. As long as there's room in the class, then I don't think I've ever heard of anybody not being able to take a CTE course if they wanted to.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. It was very, very informative. Thank
Thank
you.
you. I'm glad I could help. And if you have any other further questions, feel free, and I'll be more than happy to help.
And Mr. Soltis, I'm not going to ask you a yes or no question because I know it's been a interesting, past year for everybody. So I'm not sure how much progress we've made, but I know over the past several years as a board, we have talked about including middle school in the CTE program.
Mhm.
Do you know, has just any progress been made on that yet? Or is that
We
still...
offer, yeah, we offer the same programs in the middle school levels in all of our middle schools. Now, they're not full-blown programs. They're more of a exploratory type programs. Each school is a little bit different. Some programs are only 9 weeks long. It's kind of a rotation program where they go through everyone. They go through agriculture, they go through facts, they go through some business classes. We do have all three of those areas in all four of our middle schools now, yes. And also we have the CTSOs, especially FFA is very strong in our middle schools.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other board members have questions before we move on? Thank you very much for taking the time and doing the presentation.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. I know you got a lot on your minds this busy time, so thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, superintendent's comments. Madam Superintendent, do you have any comments this evening in addition to the release you put out earlier today?
Yes, ma'am. The only comment that I have is to thank both Dr. Knott at Shepherdstown Pharmacy and the 38 volunteers that we had who put on the vaccination clinic this past Thursday. We vaccinated 333 people in a little under 6 hours. And I got a lot of positive feedback from folks who appreciated how convenient and professional it was. We will be running another clinic this Thursday. We had a vaccination meeting with Michelle Blatt at the State Department about 2 hours ago, and they are sending us the next list and the next round of vaccines, and I will be sending information out to staff as soon as she provides me with that list, which is supposed to be in my inbox before 9 p.m. this evening. So thank you to them.
All right, thank you. And in the past, couple months, I've seen some memes on the computer talking about if vaccines were given by either Chick-fil-A or Amazon, things would run very smoothly. So after watching the whole process of what your staff did and, how they came together and got it done, which is, a health issue, which isn't really in our wheelhouse as educators, but, I think our staff is chicken sandwich and package delivery worthy. So I think they really, really did a fantastic job. So thank you to all of them. And I think we're moving in the right direction as far as that goes. All right, Deputy Superintendent for Instructional Support, Mr. Dilly.
Good evening, board members. I wanted to provide you several updates this evening. Looking at the Jefferson Virtual Academy moving into next year, obviously, as we look at that future, one of the key and critical components that we have to determine are the amount of students that are wishing to participate in that. So we're currently working with our schools, trying to gather that information so that we can make some important decisions as we move forward. Because, for example, if we have 100 students participating, JVA is going to look one way, but if we have 500 students, it's going to look another way. And as we look towards that, establishing those numbers, we will be getting more and more information to you all as a board and to let you all know what is happening as the next steps of planning are taking place. One of the things that we've already ran into a little bit as a bit of a challenge, one of the requests that we've seen from our schools is the request for the JVA to be essentially separated as its own K-12 school. And we met, my team, part of my team and I met with the West Virginia Department of Education prior to Christmas break and met with them to discuss options and how we can make that look. And unfortunately, we've ran into a number of roadblocks. And so we are looking at what the recommendations are at this point to try to move forward, where we were hoping to try to separate that completely into WEVIS for scheduling purposes and making that a lot easier to work with. It appears that's not going to be an option that they're going to permit us to do. So we're going to have to rework some things. And so we're looking at perhaps treating it similar to how we work with James Rumsey or the OLC. So we think we have some options moving forward, but we're going to continue to let you all know as we make progress and get that information completed. We also shared recently with our high schools a draft programs of study for the virtual academy looking into next year. And that was a very conservative programs of study based on what we know we can offer exclusively at this time. And again, as we get those numbers, we look and are anticipating those programs of study and offerings being expanded. So we'll continue to provide you updates as we progress down our planning and our work towards implementation for next year. We're also working with our dual credit partners, various crosswalks to go, and I'll have to thank Kathy Farrow and her work with the partners in expanding the dual credit. And as those courses continue to be vetted, we'll be bringing those forward for your all's approval. I know she has a significant list that our partners have submitted to her, and she is in that process. And I want to thank her for all her work on doing that. We continue to thank our partners as we continue to make available a variety of opportunities for our students. And so we're excited about those various opportunities. Also this evening, I wanted to provide you a little bit of an update on our learning management system adoption. We are in the process of still developing our rubric. We have established some core criteria, everything from data integration to grading, attendance, communication with caregivers, and looking at supporting existing digital tools, data analytics, also things like supporting offline work. So if students have internet issues, they still can utilize our online platforms and support our one-to-one initiative. We're also looking at things that address accessibility, so making sure that a program is accessible to all of our students, no matter what their circumstances may be. We also want to make sure that our special education and support personnel have access to classrooms and students. So it's a variety of things like that that we are continuing to add to our criteria that we're looking for is developing a rubric for the ultimate development of our RFP. One of the things that we're in a process, because as we look down through this list, we see that it's largely administrative. And so right now what we have going on, thanks to a large part Dr. Rowan and Mrs. Cantley's work, they're in the process of helping to organize, along with some of our coordinators, some stakeholder groups to try to get some student, parent, and teacher input so that we can expand our rubric and make sure that the learning management system that we select supports Jefferson County in the most productive way that it can. And we're hopeful that that rubric, as we kind of finalize that rubric, that it will be a big part of our transparency. So everybody, including the companies that are participating in the proposals, will clearly know what Jefferson County is wanting out of a system. And we're hopeful that we'll be having that out in the next month or so for your all's consideration as an approval of an RFP to go out for our companies. And the final thing is just wanted to update you all with this evening. Obviously, after the first 9 weeks, we had to go back and retool and rework a number of our schedules and a variety of different things to help some of our students that maybe were struggling in the virtual space or in the current environment they were in. And so I shared with you last time a variety of the statistics surrounding that. And I also wanted to this evening commend our schools for coming forward with a large number of different ideas in which ways they could support students, everything from, as in some cases, home visits, personalized tutoring, additional remediation times, altering schedules. I think it's important to recognize the additional time and effort that so many of our teachers are taking right now to support students and finding ways, because sometimes they are doing this after hours during their planning periods. And so this evening, I just want to recognize their ongoing work and appreciation for the things they're trying to do to help support our students at this time. So that's all I have for this evening.
Madam President, may I give just a brief update? I know I'm not on the agenda, but I did want to speak to our pandemic safety plan and a return to school to let staff and parents and students know that we will be doing an update to that plan so that when we return to school, we provide some clarity and continue with the safe schools that we have had prior to our exiting of schools in November. So I just thought that was important to note.
Thank you very much. I know there are some additional meetings this week about return to school, so I'm sure we'll get more information as that comes along. Thank you, Ms. White.
Thank you.
Ms. Dilly. Mr. Dilly, I do have a quick question for you about the schools reaching out and things like that with the virtual students. Do you know if our past volunteers are still being utilized, or is that program kind of on hold right now?
There's been some limitations to the volunteers just because of their access to the building, but I know in some cases they're being utilized in some cases, but a large percentage of the actual work that's taking place is by our existing teachers and staff. So just because we're trying to keep that environment with less and less individuals in the schools.
Okay, I didn't know if there were any virtual, programs that the past volunteers were using or things like that. That might be one additional way to reach some students that are virtual that need that extra adult support.
I was going to share with you, there is one, I know we do have one with Shepherd University. There's a mentoring program and support program that we have been utilizing with them. So there is some different outreaches, things of that nature that are taking place. I can't speak to all the specifics, but there are some different groups that are working with our students in our classrooms at this point.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Jordan.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm curious about the number of failures for this semester compared to maybe a year ago when the students weren't online. Do you have that data available?
I don't have it right here in
Mr.
front of me. I don't have it right here in front of me,
Right.
but I can gather it. I can,
I think it would be helpful when considering, creating or moving forward with the virtual program. Just
yes, so Dr. Joy, I do agree. I think one of the concerns we have is the considerable larger sum of students that have not found as much success in the virtual environment as they have in a traditional in-person environment. So those are considerations that we are weighing heavily as we move forward with our planning of the virtual academy into the future. So thank you for bringing that point up.
All right. If there are no other questions, let's go ahead and move on. Next on the agenda is the approval of minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the regular board meeting held December 14th, 2020?
So moved, Ogden.
Thank you, Ms. Ogden. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Cable. Any changes or discussion? All in favor of approving the regular board minutes from December 14th, 2020?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right, citizens' comments. We do have a hefty little list here this evening. I do just want to remind everybody that you are limited to 3 minutes, and I will set my timer. And when you hear that 3-minute timer go off, please wrap up.
Here we go, Jeff.
Please wrap up pretty quickly. And also just please remember, in the world that we're living in these days, use your kind words. We would just appreciate that. First up is Priscilla Rod. And just so you can prepare, after Priscilla is going to be Dean Kern.
And I should say Dean Kern is otherwise occupied this evening. He was planning on speaking, but he couldn't make it.
Okay. Whenever you're ready, Ms. Rod.
Okay. 1 second, please. All right. I'll begin now. Hello. Today I'm here to read you a version of a letter I sent to Governor Jim Justice. This fall, I began a new teaching job in Jefferson County as a special education teacher, and I knew this meant a demanding year as I learned the ins and outs of IEPs and the new curriculum. I disagreed with this board when with the plan for fully reopening the schools at the beginning of the year, and I wasn't surprised when it became apparent we were dramatically understaffed to handle the mix of virtual and in-person students. My own children's schedules were a mess, teachers were confused and unprepared, but like many, like all, I was determined to provide my students with a stellar education. My principal asked for extra help and I agreed. On top of my regular special education students, I agreed to teach a full 4th and 5th grade curriculum for a group of students with behavior issues. So every day I log onto my computer and I collect, organize, download, upload, deliver, and grade English, math, science, social studies, and health for 4 different grade levels. Every single day and most nights, I have to plan and deliver 5 separate lessons for exceptional learners who need differentiation in 4 different grade levels, along with being on committees and attending meetings and writing IEPs, etc. Now, I believe I have managed to do my job well. I love my kids, I love my families, but it also means that our county's plan came at the expense of my stress, my time with my children, my ability to help care for aging family members, and more. And I know many teachers in the same situation. But once again, people want to open the schools at the expense of teachers. And after everything my colleagues and I have given, I'm being asked to recklessly endanger myself. I am being sent in without a shield. I have a heart condition, a pacemaker. I'm not 50. There is a light at the end of the at the end of the tunnel here. We have infection rates through the roof. There's a vaccine out there. If we could just wait. During my years as a teacher, I have given and given, but I feel like I'm being asked too much now. And I'm not somebody who says that very often. I like to give. Teachers are continually asked to sacrifice and give with little in return, but asking teachers, even the willing ones, to sacrifice their health and potentially their lives feels like it's going too far. We can wait for a vaccine. We can wait until this terrible peak is over. We can reach our students. It doesn't have to be today. It doesn't have to be next week. Right? We can take safety measures and protect the people who give so much all the time. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Next up is Lanai Atkinson. And after her will be Keith Moody.
There we go. Hello. Dr. Gibson and members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to speak before you tonight to share the concerns expressed to me by the members of AFT Jefferson that I represent. First, I would like to thank you for supplying the cleaning supplies and doing the best that you all can in this difficult situation. We are all doing the best that we can. I also want to thank you for considering the continuation of the COVID leave after or later this evening. It definitely relieves a great deal of anxiety from the employees of Jefferson County Schools. Before I get into the real nitty-gritty of what I have to say, I would like to make it perfectly clear that every teacher and service personnel would much rather be teaching and supporting our kids in person. We all know that this is what's best for students. No one is saying otherwise. What we are concerned about is the safety of returning to schools in person at the height of this pandemic. Jefferson County is seeing an all-time high infection rates and percent positivity rates. We are steadily finding 60+ new people in the community each and every day that are positive for this virus. We are consistently in the red each day when the map is released. The DHHR COVID data was released as a way to keep our kids in school safe. It is intended to be transparent and provide a guideline for keeping schools open or closed. And I lost my space. Why, when we are seeing the community spread at such high levels, are we now saying that the map and data no longer matter and we need to get kids back in school? Why are we doing this when it's clear that the virus is not contained and it's affecting more and more people each and every day? Are our kids not in our community? Are the teachers and staff not members of this community? Is it really safe to return to in-person learning at this time? The data and reporting system designed by the experts say it's not. The teachers and staff are worried about the safety and well-being for the kids in our classrooms, the kids in our homes, and the community at large. New data released by the CDC indicates that children are in fact super spreaders of this virus, and that fact and the fact that they seem to be asymptomatic makes opening schools dangerous and really irresponsible. Jefferson County has many protocols in place to keep kids safe, but are these protocols enough when our numbers are so high now? The answer is we don't know, but we haven't been in school since the numbers have been at the levels that they're currently at, and I think that that's something that we need to consider. This past week, AFT, JCEA, and WVSSPA sent out a survey to Jefferson County employees. We received 403 responses, and of those responses, 80% feel it is not safe for kids to return to the schools, and they do not feel comfortable being in classrooms before we are vaccinated. With that, 68% said that once vaccinated, they would happily return to the classroom. Again, this is what we are wanting, to be with our kids, but to do it in a safe manner. 44% of the staff surveyed are considering using sick days or exploring a leave of absence until they can be vaccinated.
Ms. Atkinson, I'm sorry to cut you off, but your time is up.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
That was 3 minutes.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Using my watch or phone for the watch, so thank you. Next is Keith Moody, and after Mr. Moody is Bobby Block.
Good evening, Dr. Gibson and board members. I come here this evening to discuss the possible return to in-person learning that has been laid out with Governor Justice's recommendation. I speak to you as a Jefferson County schools teacher, a parent of 2 children in Jefferson County schools, and a resident of the Jefferson County community. While I realize that many issues over recent times have become political, I do not believe that this issue falls into that category. This is an issue of safety first and foremost. Back in August, educators returned to school knowing that this would be a year like no other. While many of us felt uncomfortable about the return to the classroom, we also acknowledged that for the most part, West Virginia had been spared the significant spread that many other areas of our country had faced. We continued to check the color-coded map every week to ensure that the cases were not increasing in our area. As time went on, it became clear that these metrics were being shaped and manipulated to fit the narrative that was being told. However, teachers continued to do their jobs. We wiped our desks down with the cleaning solution provided. We reminded students about the proper way to wear their face masks. We tried to ensure social distancing when large numbers of students were in the hallways during class switchovers. Again, this was all being done with the minimal spread of the virus in our area. Now, as our numbers are higher than ever in Jefferson County, we are being told that everything is changing once again. The map we checked every Saturday evening to determine what the next week would look like was unimportant. Now that the state map has become almost entirely red and no longer can be manipulated to fit the narrative, we should ignore the map and the metrics. I have heard the claim from the governor and others that spread is not coming from children in schools. The governor used statistics from Finland in his press conference to show how minimal the spread was. The problem with that is that the schools in Finland implemented extreme mitigation steps that could not be duplicated in Jefferson County. I am here tonight to ask you to allow us to remain remote until all staff personnel that wish to be vaccinated have received both doses and the recommended time for effectiveness has passed. According to the West Virginia State Code, the governor has the authority to close schools, but not to force counties to return to in-person learning if they deem it to be unsafe. Governor Justice acknowledged this when he stated that he believed it was best to let local control prevail. We are nearing the finish line that has for so long seemed unattainable. To return to in-person learning at the height of the pandemic when we are so close to vaccination defies logic. The decision over the health of the members of our community versus 1 or 2 more months of virtual learning is not a choice at all. The unknown long-term effects of COVID-19 to all individuals, those that show symptoms and those who are asymptomatic, should drive us to do everything in our power to protect as many people as we can from experiencing that. We are currently experiencing unprecedented spread in our region, and even the surrounding counties from neighboring states are choosing to switch to remote or remain remote at this time. I am often asked why I continue to teach in a state that has shown a disrespect for educators over the past several years. My answer to those people is that my county and my school has always valued us as teachers and members of the community. Please do not make us choose between the long-term well-being of our families and our jobs. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up is Bobby Block, and after Ms. Block, Terry Odell. Ms. Block, whenever you're ready. Ms. Block, you're on mute. Now we can hear you.
Okay. I want to start off by saying I am very moved and touched by the dedication of the teachers. That was not part of my original testimony, but after listening to you, I just feel it's necessary to, I applaud your efforts. In regards to the testimony, there are 3 points that I would like to raise, 3 points that I continue to raise and will continue to raise throughout these community board meetings. The first is related to the sinkhole by North Jefferson, and that it is a toxic situation that needs to be looked at because it is a public nuisance and also threatens the health and safety both of the children and the staff, and that the board needs to deal with that, and that at minimum to bring in an environmental group to test the toxicity would protect the board and protect the children, so to speak. And I have mentioned this on several occasions, and that's the Mid-Atlantic Children's Environmental Health Program. And if you so desire, I would be more than happy to share that information with you. So that's the first point. The second point relates to dealing with the COVID situation, the nutritional issues relating to children. We have children that are not getting the nutrition needed to receive the necessary support. Children need food to learn, whether they're learning at home or whether they're learning in school. And that is not happening. It is not necessarily Jefferson County's fault. We are being shortchanged by the state, and someone needs to stand up to the state and say, unacceptable behavior. Our children deserve better in terms of nutrition. The other concern I have is also COVID related, and it is in regards to the virtual classrooms. There are real challenges right now in terms of the virtual classrooms. And there is also going to be challenges with in-classroom situations. There needs to be truly a balancing of both and respect for the children, the teachers, and the parents and families.
Ms. Block, I'm sorry, but your time is up now.
And I will testify next month and next month until the issue of the sinkhole.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, next up is Terry Odell, and after Ms. Odell, Stephanie Laptosh.
I want to thank Dr. Gibson and the board for letting me speak tonight. I have a couple of things, and hopefully I could talk real fast for you. First, I want to thank Dr. Gibson for always including the 3 union presidents for meetings to talk about the concerns and well-being of the staff as well as the students. Many times I have texted her myself on evenings, weekends, during the day, emailed, called, and I'm sure I'm a pain on her side at times, but I do appreciate, even though we may agree and disagree at times, we respect each other for our opinions. as I move on, I want to also stress to everyone that staff want the students back in school. We miss our children. We know they learn better in school. They need their friends, they need to socialize, they need the interaction face-to-face, in person. With that being said, we also want it to be very safe. And right now, there's a lot of things out there that's not making it safe for us. With that being said, we do need the vaccination, and we do need to take consideration the time frame for that vaccination, the first and second shot, so we all can be safe with each other and with the students. I think the problem we have too is the confusion from the beginning of all this with these lovely maps and Justice's input. That was a joke. We all know that. We know that it's out the window and there's not a lot they could do, but we are very much in danger. And as much as I want to see the kids, as much as I want them back, I just don't think it's safe right now to have them back in the school until after we've all had shots. It's your choice. And I hope that like you have provided the shots for us, you have provided leave for us when we get sick, you have supported us in so many ways. I hope the board will consider a time frame that we all can come back where it's safe for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Now it's Stephanie Laptosh, and after her, it's Angela Weaver. Ms. Laptosh, are you there? Stephanie, if you're speaking, you're muted. We can't hear you. All right, next up is Angela. Oh, is that her? All right, next up is Angela Weaver. And after Angela Weaver, we have Richard Urban.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Angela Wyatt, formerly Angela Weaver. I'm kind of using both of them this year. And I'm the president of the Jefferson County Education Association. I'd like to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. I must say, at first I was very hesitant to speak this evening, not for lack of an opinion on the issue surrounding our reentry to schools next week, but because the teachers, service personnel, and other staff members that I represent are very divided in their opinions about the governor's recent change. Following his announcement to discontinue the use of the map and return to in-person instruction next week, I received several emails from concerned educators in our county regarding the change. So that spurred me to send out a survey to my membership where I discovered that 50% are against returning in person on the 19th. That's right, 50%. So perhaps you can see my quandary as I come to you this evening. COVID-19 and the safety measures necessary to mitigate the spread of the virus continues to be a very polarizing subject throughout our community, our state, and our country. And you can see that reflected in the numbers I just shared with you from my organization. So what exactly do I propose to all of you this evening? As someone who represents a membership that is split right down the middle, I have to say I agree with most of what I've heard tonight. I think that when in doubt, we just don't. That might seem like an oversimplification of a very complex problem, or maybe some old-fashioned advice, when in doubt, don't. But being so split, I believe we should err on the side of caution. And clearly the numbers I shared with you indicate a great or significant amount of doubt. I'm not suggesting we don't return to school soon. In a separate countywide survey that was mentioned earlier, the percentage of staff members who already feel comfortable returning combined with those who would feel comfortable returning after vaccines are distributed would be 90% of the staff. So that means that delaying the reentry would make a big difference. And yes, nobody really wants to delay the reentry to in-person, but better teaching and more learning will happen for families, students, and staff members when they feel safe at school. And the date is not too far in the future if the vaccine distribution plan is accurate. We're talking about a matter of weeks, not months. I know there's a lot of talk regarding academic loss and social emotional well-being of our students when they aren't in the classroom. These are the primary concerns of my members who just simply want to come back on the 19th. But I would encourage all of us to keep in mind the potential ramifications of bringing students back into a stressed and anxious environment for what will amount to just a few weeks difference. I want to thank the board and Dr. Gibson again for everything that you've done and continue to do to support our students and staff. I'd like to thank you for your time, and again, thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Wyatt. All right, next up is Richard Urban, and after Mr. Urban, we have Ebony Frame.
Okay, thanks. I'm Richard Urban. Good evening I live in Shannondale. Well, first of all, I want to address the issue of the letter sent out to some employees. Threatening to terminate employees for simply attending a speech by President Trump is a violation of the First Amendment. I was there. Everything was copacetic. I wasn't at the Capitol, but I was at the speech. And that's bullying. It creates a horrible work environment. It's also a waste of taxpayer funds. The board should examine if this is appropriate behavior by Ms. Gibson. Also, it'd be better to teach and give an example about constitutional freedoms instead of cancel culture. I'm not going to say more about that. I also want to address especially the 2 new health education curricula that I understand are up for approval tonight. The organization my wife and I founded in 2003, which is Urban Life Training, has extensive experience teaching absence-centered sexual risk avoidance, sexual health education to over 3,000 youth, and also providing peer counseling and clubs to interested youth in middle and high school. We did that in DC and other surrounding metro area. The 2 curricula that you have chosen indicate that they adhere to the guidelines by SICAS, an organization founded by Mary Calderon of Planned Parenthood. SICAS promotes so-called comprehensive sex education. That means that school-age youth are not encouraged to abstain from sexual activity. Sexual exploration is seen as being healthy as long as contraceptives are used. This contrasts with absence-centered sexual health education, which is the real comprehensive sexual health education. This is because sexual abstinence is stated as the expected standard for school-age youth. You think that's common sense, right? That's in line with federal Title V standards. Virtually 100% of parents, in my experience, agree with this approach. Yet you're trying to purchase a curricula, I should say, that will encourage sexuality of all kinds, including same-sex relationships. Keep in mind that middle and high school youth are impressionable and are not clear whether or not they have same-sex attraction. To use a curriculum that ascribes to SICAS philosophy that, quote, sex ed as SICAS envisions that connects and addresses a variety of social issues. Sex ed sits at the nexus of many social justice movements, from LGBTQ rights and reproductive justice to the Pound Me Too movement, and urgent conversations around consent and healthy relationships, unquote. Therefore, you're choosing activist curricula that by their own standards promote homosexual relationships by normalizing them, and do not promote waiting to have sex until marriage, which is the only 100% sure way to avoid pregnancy, disease, and emotional damage. I urge you to delay the curricular approval pending a thorough investigation of the curriculum by parents and concerned citizens, which should be made available to parents and community members freely. And I could also send you the Title V standards. I think that's 3 minutes, right?
That's
Yeah.
it. Perfect timing.
Yeah, okay, those are my comments. I hope you'll consider delaying approving that curricula pending further study.
Mr. Urban. Next up is Ebony Frame, and after Ebony Frame, we have Storm Frame.
Hey guys, thanks for letting me speak tonight. I'm going to start off with the COVID situation. I'm not sure if we're considering going back to school because of our failure rates, or if we're considering going back because the governor lost his pencil box. Can't color the map any color now. I would like to point out that the failure rates are being compared to previous years where it was business as usual. This is not business as usual. These kids are not failing, they're surviving. They're thriving in areas that we wouldn't even imagine, and might actually do better in college where they're self-starters than the kids that have been coming through at this point. That being said, I didn't sign up for this. I want the kids in class. I didn't want to ever be in a pandemic, but here we are. We're facing it, all of us together. And if we just jump ship and do the cowardice thing and just go right back into business as usual, then we're not teaching these kids to think out of the box. We can do that. Nobody's ever changed the world by sticking in a box because somebody told them to conform. Now, everybody's pretty much said the same things about that, so I'm going to move on to the next thing. Dr. Gibson, thank you for sending out a letter and investigating anyone who works for the school system who may have taken part in the terrorist attack that occurred last week. I think we can all agree that if they were just at a rally, absolutely fine. If you're a terrorist and took part in that, not so much fine. I'm pretty sure when I was a senior in high school, I lost my favorite principal because he had a DUI. We sign a code of conduct. We're not allowed to do certain things. It is what it is. Lastly, I find it funny that we're even talking about civil rights being taken away or constitutional rights being taken away when technically I can still be fired for being a homosexual in this state. Proudly homosexual. I love my family. I love my wife. I should get to keep my job because I'm damn good at it. That has nothing to do with how I teach these kids. Stop losing good teachers because we're too afraid to move forward. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Next up is Storm Frame. Whenever you're
I'll
ready.
just slide over. First, thank you for your service and your continued efforts to prioritize student and staff safety. That goes for Dr. Gibson and all of the board members. Even when it's not the most popular decision, we all appreciate that more than we can express and have appreciated it for, since March when this began. I'm going to read the rest of Ms. Atkinson since she got cut off. Her 3 minutes, she was representing AFT. And so here's the rest of what she was going to say. We know that our kids are struggling. We know that parents are struggling. We know that teachers are struggling. But while we are struggling, we are also surviving this pandemic. This is something none of us have seen in our lifetimes. We are all doing the best we can. At the end of the day, our members are yearning to be with their students in person. But we also want our students to be safe and survive this pandemic so that we have the opportunity to teach them now and in the future. We worry about the social emotional needs of our kids who could bring this home to a parent or grandparent. How do we teach a child who brought this virus home from school and now has a grandparent who has passed away? How do we help that child overcome the weight of that so he is able to learn? We all know in school that school is the best option, being in school for kids. We all want to be in person teaching our students. We miss them dearly. We want what's best for them. What we are asking for is a little more time to be vaccinated and for the vaccination to be deemed effective so returning to the classroom doesn't have dire consequences. We feel that that's what's best for our kids. That's what's best for our parents and teachers, is to wait until employees can be vaccinated so we all have the best chance of surviving this deadly virus. Please continue remote learning based on science and data. Today, West Virginia is #1 in the nation for newly cases per 100,000 people. I know we're all doing the best to be as safe as possible, but even one life that could have been prevented is just too much. I shared a picture with the Board of Education of the beach with a shark in the water. It's a group of people and an adult saying, quote, "It's time to get the kids back in the water. Only 1% of them will be eaten." 1% is too many. As a parent, I agree that we need to improve our virtual learning experience. I have 4 kids currently attending JVA, and I would be happy to provide Mr. Dilly with any other suggestions in the future. But I know that it's not safe for kids to return. And I know that I'm proud that my students are in the JVA program and are being as successful as possible. As my wife just said, we are surviving this pandemic. And I appreciate Dr. Gibson and the board's continued support to keep us safe through this.
Ms.
Thank
Frank,
you.
That's your 3 minutes. Thank you. All right, and that's it for public comment this evening. Moving on to the consent agenda. Dr. Gibson, are there any?
Excuse me, could I say something, please? I just feel like I'm only one of 5 people, but as we discuss the direction of Jefferson County Schools, I just want people to know that I hear your concerns about safety in the schools, and you know, I'm going to be working with the fellow board members to ensure that we have safety in our schools for all the employees and students.
Thank you. All right, the consent agenda. Dr. Gibson, did you have some introductions this evening, and are there any changes or updates?
I do know and can speak to, and Amy perhaps could speak better too. I know that one change is there was a clerical error that was redlined where we had put in a single position, whereas the board's wish during the IT presentation, technical presentation, was for 2. As far as introductions, I have 2 folks to introduce this evening. The first is Mr. Jeremy Braithwaite. Hello, Jeremy. If you could wave for everyone, that's great. Jeremy comes to us from North Jefferson, where he taught, and prior to that, he taught in Clark County. He earned his master's in educational leadership from JMU, and he also earned a BS in kinesiology, which educational leadership was much easier to say for me than kinesiology. But we welcome him as the new AP at Driftwood Elementary School, should the board approve my recommendation. Mr. Braithwaite, if you would like to say anything to welcome to Jefferson County.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Gibson. And that is just that. Thank you very, very much for this opportunity. I am so excited to be a part of this county and to venture into administration. I'm extremely thankful for also Kelly Osborne for giving me this opportunity to work alongside her at Driftwood. And I'm just very excited. So thank you very much, and I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your work at North Jefferson. Also this evening, we'd like to introduce another individual that I am recommending to the board, Mr. Dylan Bites. Mr. Bites is being recommended for our coordinator of child nutrition program. For the last 12 years, he has been the director of child nutrition in Preston County here in West Virginia. He has an incredible amount of experience. As all of you know, when we hire any administrative position from Mr. Braithwaite to Mr. Bites, it requires unanimous consent of everyone on the hiring committee. Mr. Bites, being a WVU grad and a Jefferson High School grad and a native of Jefferson County, who is very excited about moving back. We're pretty excited to welcome him. So Mr. Bites, if you could say hello.
Hey guys, appreciate the opportunity and look forward to giving you guys my best ability here in the next few months.
Thank you, sir. And we do have quite a bit of work for you, Mr. Bites, as Ms. White can attest to in terms of the volume of our child nutrition program right now.
I absolutely can. We want to welcome Mr. Braithwaite. Welcome. Mr. Bites, welcome home. And it's good to have you back in Jefferson County. I look forward to working with you. Very, very talented, lots of skills, and we'll do exciting things as we have been doing during the pandemic. And I've shared briefly with Mr. Bites that We have been getting food to students in any way we can. The bus drivers have been instrumental in doing so. We take a porch pickups, porch drop-offs to students. We are starting on the buses in getting food to students, as well as hosting in school zones every week for 2 hours when we're remote, food for students. So we've done an incredible job getting food out there, including partnering with Kids Power Packs and delivering those to over 200 students' homes. So we continue to do that. Principals continue to partner with us to express the need, and every single child who needs a food in Jefferson County, we assure that they have food. So Dylan, we welcome you as a part of that, and we're excited with the things we're doing in feeding all the students in Jefferson County.
I can attest to that. My son's bus driver texts us every week and asks if we need some food and if we need a food drop off at our bus stop, and alerts all of these families. Shout out to our bus drivers. I know that transportation isn't on here this evening, but every one of those bus drivers called every single kid on their bus, on their route, and asked them if they needed food and added them to a drop-off list at their bus stop. So kudos to transportation for reaching out. So
very, very good point. They do. They call home every week religiously. Yes.
Yeah. So those are the 2 announcements for recommendations to the board, ma'am.
And the only other correction that I had was line 22. There was a name that was transposed. So that was the only other correction to bring to your attention this evening.
Okay, so is there a motion to approve the amended number 22 consent agenda?
Osborne, so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Is there a second?
Joy, I second.
Joy. Any question or discussion? All right, all those in favor of the consent agenda?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right, moving on, unfinished business. Action on approval of high school, middle school health wellness textbook adoption.
Good evening, board. This evening, we're asking that you approve the high school, middle school health wellness textbook that was brought before you last board meeting.
Is there a motion to approve the high school, middle school health wellness textbook?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Cable. Is there a second?
I'll second it, and then I'll have a question.
Thank you, Ms. Ogden. All right, there's a motion on the floor now for discussion. Did you have a question, Ms. Ogden?
I did. Did we have any public comment at all, other than the one we had this evening from either staff or community members on the curriculum that was put out the last several weeks?
I had not received any public information from anybody at this point. This evening's concerns are the first I've heard of anybody from the community. The books, just for your all's information, were available for review for the last 2 weeks. And I think it's also important to make the board aware that these curricular choices are just that. We teach to the standards that West Virginia establishes, so that it doesn't necessarily mean that we emphasize various sections that are a resource for teaching purposes. And I believe Ms. Farrow has a little bit of additional information for you all as well to help provide some clarity and speak to some of the concern that was brought out this evening.
Good evening. Just in response to the public comment from this evening, the high school curriculum, they did decide as a curriculum team, and they are on here if you would like to, further ask any questions. They're the experts in their field, but they did choose the essential textbook version, which does not include the last 2 chapters, 23 and 24, on pregnancy prevention and understanding sexuality. So those are not going to be a part of the textbook in the high school health adoption. So I don't know if that addresses any of the questions or concerns that were brought up earlier this evening. But again, we do follow what the West Virginia College and Career Readiness Standards says we must teach for health. But, you know, they did decide that what was presented and the way it was presented, that they were going to leave that out of this textbook.
What's the reason for leaving it out? What was the justification?
I can let the teachers speak because they were the ones that looked at it. They didn't like the way it was presented in the new textbook, but I can certainly allow any of the health teachers that would like to speak up.
If I may. Willie Belmonte, Jefferson High School. I just wanted to address some of the misconceptions that came out earlier, even with the idea of not adopting the full textbook. We have been teaching abstinence in this state for the better part of the last 50 years, and yet we remain in the lower 45, or if 45 ranked or lower every year in teenage pregnancy. So that's just not working. Biology overtakes. It doesn't matter your religion or your teachings at home. At some point, biology overtakes the nurture. Nature overcomes nurture. Dr. Raul Gupta, who was the former commissioner of the West Virginia DHHR, says that it's critical that we should have proper education provided to teens of childbearing age so that they don't suffer the same health and economic and social consequences. So the idea that if we strictly teach abstinence, things will get better is unequivocally false. Also, coming from, this is my first year here in Jefferson County. Despite having graduated here, I started my teaching career in Frederick, Maryland. Maryland, much more progressive in the state standards as far as pregnancy and teaching contraceptive as young as the 8th grade, which even then statistics show us may be a little late to be teaching. But Maryland, as opposed to West Virginia in terms of state teen birth rate is halved. There's just no reason to still be in this ancient way of thinking that we shouldn't be teaching anything but abstinence, because it's just not feasible. But like Ms. Farrow said, we don't have the we have CSOs and guidelines that we have to teach to the state. We are not obligated to teach anything beyond that. So I just felt that those comments were a bit much personally.
Samantha Vickers, Jefferson High School, Health and PE. We are guided and directed to teach what the state tells us to teach. And I'll refer you to the state CSOs for wellness education. The health teachers in the high school level opted not to choose the comprehensive textbook just because, as Ms. Farrow said, we didn't like the way it was laid out. But with the CSOs, we are obligated to discuss such things as contraceptives and STDs. However, we always give our kids the chance to opt out. We give our families the chance to opt out. We understand that families like to keep that discussion in the homes. But we are dictated by the state standards.
Well, and I'll point out that one of the main standards that I look at for health education is that they are going to analyze the effects of potentially harmful decisions that impact health and affect these decisions and the effect that decisions have on family, community, and themselves. For example, with drugs, STDs, teen pregnancy, and parenting. So, you know, I think that it is the standard that they talk about the risks that are involved with these things. They are serious things, and they are often those hard subjects that parents have a hard time tackling at the dinner table. So I think that our teachers just decided that the way it was laid out in those chapters they didn't agree with that portion. And if it was an option that they could use other supplemental resources for those things, that's what they had chosen to do. They loved the textbook. They loved the way it was current on things like vaping, and apparently the website gets updated every few months with situations that the community faces in both health and wellness. And I think awareness is very important, but like I said, they just decided as a committee, and I respected their decision about just using supplemental materials for those standards to be met.
I guess I'm misunderstanding. The last two chapters, didn't you say one of those chapters included an explanation about how pregnancy occurs? Is that correct? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you. Chapter 23 is pregnancy prevention, and they're not going to not teach that. That's not what the teachers are saying. They didn't like the position and the things that were presented in that specific textbook. So they said they're not saying that they're not going to teach their standards. They're just saying that if they could choose with those chapters in it or the textbook without those two chapters, and they opted for the second.
And what was the other chapter?
Chapter 24, Understanding Sexuality.
Okay, so I went to the board office and I went through the materials, and I didn't spend a lot of time on those last two chapters. So, I was really impressed with the curriculum, and I liked that it was current. Bullying and vaping, but I just don't remember looking a lot at those chapters. So yeah.
Miss Joy, that we had the textbooks without those chapters put into the board office and then the two high schools.
Okay, that explains why
we didn't want you to see something and that we didn't ourselves like.
Okay. Because I really thought I was losing it, because I really thought I was thorough in evaluating, and I don't know how I missed those two important chapters.
Thank you, Ms. Farrow, and thank you very much to the committee for all of your work to get us to this point. I know that's a thankless job to be on a textbook committee, but very important. So thank you very much for taking the time and effort to do that. So we have a motion on the floor right now, unless there are any other questions from board members. Okay.
I just want to say, in relation to the speaker, Mr. Urban's comments, and this, so it sounds like it's not that sexuality is or isn't being taught. It's just not part of the curriculum. Is that correct? Is that correct? Or that would be something taught somewhere else?
We are dictated by state wellness standards, and I'll direct you to, if you look the standards up, it's cluster decision under decision making, and it's standards 19 through 24. And it deals with things such as STIs, sex, drugs, teen pregnancy and parenting, refusal skills, defense and coping mechanisms. So it is a part of the curriculum, but we would choose to use supplemental materials because of the way the textbook laid that part out. It was just, we thought, inappropriate.
Okay, so the textbook has nothing to do with this abstinence or anything, because this textbook isn't even addressing the issue. So whether we adopt this curriculum, it doesn't have anything to do with infringing on Mr. Urban's wishes, because it's irrelevant, it sounds like.
I'll also go back to us at Jefferson High School, and I'm sure Washington High School does this too. We always give the families a chance to opt out of that part of the schooling, because we understand the importance of that discussion with families.
Thank you very much. So the motion
Kansas
on
City
the floor
Stakes up. We
right
want our
now
stakes to a high.
to approve the high school, middle school health wellness textbook adoption. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right, new business. A request approval to advertise for an RFP for the bond roof project at Blue Ridge Elementary. Project contingent upon the sale of the bonds. Ms. White, I assume that's you?
It is. I have several bond projects on here for RFPs for roofs. The first thing that I want to talk about before we get to that is to just let you know that the Jefferson High turf project does not appear this evening because we're seeking a national bid for that, which does not require an RFP. So we are in pursuit of that project, but it will be off a contract that is a national that we're approved per policy 8200 to pursue in the school system. One of the reasons why is because there are two companies that provide turf in the United States, one being AstroTurf, the second being Field Turf. So basically there are two companies that provide it and we'll go with one or the other. So I can continue to provide you updates and take questions on that project. And I am asking this evening that we request that you take action on the approval of first to advertise, as you said, for the RFP for a bond roof project at Blue Ridge Elementary. This project is contingent upon the sale of bonds. And I do want to say that we intend in our bond projects to use the purchasing card or the P card whenever possible and put that in our rubric to weight it. The reason being is that we can capture over $700,000 back if our vendors accept P cards for projects when we pay them. So we want to be able to capture as much money as we can as we work our way through bond projects, as we want to do that in normal everyday business. So if you have any questions about the first bond project for the roof for Blue Ridge, we'll take those and then await your vote.
Is there a motion to approve the advertisement for an RFP for the bond roof project at Blue Ridge Elementary?
Osborne, so move. Second.
Osborne. Is there a second?
Second, Lori.
Thank you, Ms. Ogden. Any discussion or questions about the RFP for the Blue Ridge roof? All right, all in favor of approving the RFP for the bond roof project at Blue Ridge Elementary?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right, next up, Ms. White, is approval to advertise for an RFP for the bond roof project at South Jefferson, the northeast section, project contingent upon the sale of bonds.
Yes, ma'am.
So move.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cable. Is there a second?
Second, Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Any discussion or question? All in favor of approving the RFP for the bond roof project at South Jefferson?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Item C, request for approval to advertise for an RFP for the bond roof project at Wright Denny, the flat sections, project contingent upon the sale of bonds. Is there a motion?
Osborne, so move.
Ogden, second.
Thank you. Any question or discussion?
Yeah, I have a question about that. It says a flat section. Is it best for us to keep this flat section flat? Randy?
It actually is not correct. It would be sloping. We would put insulation back to make sure we have positive slope so that everything runs to the drains. So flat is just kind of a generic term for a low slope roof, but it would not be flat.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I have a question. I just want to clarify contingent on the sale of bond. That means that if you don't sell the bonds, it doesn't happen? Is
That's
that what
correct.
it means? Okay, I just
We wouldn't have any money.
Yeah, I understand. I just want want to make sure it's very clear.
Yes, that's clear.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor. All in favor of approval to advertise for an RFP for the bond roof project at Wright Denny, the flat sections?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. Continue with bond roof projects. Is there a motion to approve to advertise for an RFP for the bond roof project at Shepherdstown Middle, various sections, project contingent upon the sale of bonds?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Cable. Is there a second?
Second, Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Any questions? All right, all in favor of advertising for an RFP for the bond roof project at Shepherdstown Middle?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right, request for approval to advertise for an RFP for the bond roof project at Jefferson High, the front canopy entrance, project contingent upon the sale of bonds. Is there a motion?
So move, Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Cable. Any question or discussion? All right, all in favor of advertising for the RFP for the bond roof project at Jefferson High, the front canopy entrance?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Well, Ms. White, it's going to be able to rain and we're not going to get rained on, all these roof projects.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. F, discussion and approval to extend the Family First Coronavirus Response Act benefits to the county level.
Good evening. We had attached to the agenda the summary of the FFCRA and how that was outlined and implemented for employees to benefit from during the pandemic. When the act was put in place at the start of the pandemic, it was set to expire as of December 31st, 2020. Much to disappointment, the act was not extended for us to further consider these benefits for our employees when the pandemic is still active. One of the things that was encouraged and suggested in documents and updates that we received from the Department of Labor and interpretations, as well as the West Virginia Department of Ed, is that counties could factor these benefits exactly as they are at the local level. And so that's what is attached, is a replica of what has been offered, what is currently offered for you to consider to continue on. And just for full disclosure and information, the way that the act worked is that it was put in place for us to offer it locally, but it still came out of local funds. The kind of benefit or support that the government provided when utilizing this act was that they gave us the tax credit. So the funds that, pay for the 10 days or pay for the leave of absence, that still comes over out of local funds. We just are going to be missing out on that tax credit. So I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of the funding that supports this program.
Ms. Skinner, you're muted.
Realize that. Thank you. Is there a motion to approve to extend the Family First Coronavirus Response Act benefits to the county level?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Cable. Is there a second?
Joy.
Thank you, Ms. Joy. Any discussion or question? All right. All those in favor of approving the Family First Coronavirus Response Act?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And then I do believe we have an executive session for legal this evening. Is that correct, Dr. Gibson?
Yes, ma'am.
And
Can I just ask a couple questions before we go? Because somebody just asked me a question, two questions. One is about the curriculum was were the chapters taken out of the middle school curriculum? We didn't talk about that. And then the other question was about the bond. Does the school system sell the bond, or does the Jefferson County Commission sell the bond? So those are the questions.
Okay. The middle school textbook, I'm not sure. Is there somebody from the committee still on from the middle school?
I do believe we have some committee members. I can say that it is my understanding that the committee did choose the comprehensive textbook, which would include those chapters. But I will let the committee speak on that.
We may have to get that answer at another time because it sounds like
Okay.
the committee members have left for the evening.
Okay.
And as far as the bond goes, the school system, we have attorneys hired and financial people hired to sell the bonds. It's done through the school system. It's not done through the county commission.
And what are the taxpayers' responsibilities for those?
It's to pay for them.
Just want to make sure the public knows.
Right. Well, this isn't on the agenda this evening, so I don't want to go too
Okay.
deep in the woods as far as that goes.
Yeah, somebody asked me a question, so that's why I'm asking for clarification.
The bond will be a line item on their tax bill for their property. All right. So the executive session this evening is for legal and we do not anticipate action. Is that correct, Dr. Gibson?
No, ma'am, no action.
Okay. Is there a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Cable. Thank you, Mr. Osborne. All right. All in favor of going into executive session to discuss legal with no action pending?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right.